What's going on, YouTube? This is Reborn coming back at you again. My name is Felipe Haley, and I want to welcome a new guest. We don't have Brother Pastor Ed today. This is Dr. Alan Ricthman. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I'm glad you could make it onto the show. It's a privilege, honestly, to have you on here.
Thanks.
So how's your day today?
It's winding down.
Yeah, we got it late tonight, huh?
Yeah, a little bit.
And then, obviously, we had a little discussion earlier about it, but the Cowboys did win, and I did hear that you're from Detroit, so that's kind of shifting around some.
We'll have to beat it another way.
No 2-point conversion games, tell you what. But thank you so much for being a part of the channel today and having this opportunity with us that we get to ask these questions that actually some of our kids from our children's ministry got to write up, and a couple that I have as well that I wanted to ask you. So Thank you again. So for the viewers, please tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I was raised Orthodox Jewish family, long line of Orthodox and Hasidic rabbis, the ultra-Orthodox. And I first went to church as a kid, going to vacation Bible school. My parents had divorced. My mom was working. She couldn't stop me. And I had no idea what any of that was. But I enjoyed it. But when it was over, I figured that was the end of it until the youth director of that church found out I had teenage sisters. And so he came and wrestled with my mom about letting him take those girls to youth camp. They wound up going, and Mom said, "You can go. Don't you listen to a thing they tell you." Just like teenagers, they told Mom anything she wanted to hear so they could do what they wanted to do. They came home saved, and Mom gave up, let us do whatever we wanted to. And I was happy about this, but I got pushed into a sham profession of faith. I had no idea what they were talking about, but it kept me coming to church. And then as a teenager, 1969, I finally did get saved. And then a year later, God called me into ministry. And so I pastored for the first 18 years of our ministry. And then kicking and screaming, God dragged me out of the pastorate and put us into Jewish ministry. And that was back in 1997. So we've been doing this about 27, 28 years.
Wow.
And a little over 10 years ago, we actually started Ahava, started our own outreach, and that's been going really pretty well.
Well, that's awesome to hear, and that's a long life, just a whole lifestyle of the ministry and how you led up to it, and that actually helps out to bring up the second part of my question is, what led you to bring up your own ministry? What helped you drive towards that area?
Well, we were with a very large global ministry, Jewish ministry, and we were with them almost 17 years. And they just kept making the movement to the left, so to speak. The doctrine was getting watered down. The doctrinal stand was getting watered down. They were bringing missionaries on board who were not in agreement with the doctrine that I had to agree to when I came on board with them. And they were going into seeking to go into churches that were not, there are a lot of things wrong with their doctrine, where they weren't necessarily true to the virgin birth and, and the authority of the Word of God and the inerrancy of the Word of God, and they believe in baptizing infants, and a lot of things that I just couldn't really go with. And I found myself in trouble with a lot of my supporting pastors a lot, because they were, because of the internet, they were able to read and learn more about this ministry. And they said, you got to help me. I said, I just can't keep excusing this anymore. And I had guys that I look up to that love us, that have supported us for decades, and they're going, we just can't do it anymore. And so we just finally, there came a break over these doctrinal issues and a push to be in those types of churches.
Mm-hmm.
And so that became where we found it necessary to leave and start our own outreach. And I think God's honored that. And all the preachers that support me are just really relieved that we finally did.
Probably lifted up a burden for them,
Yeah.
but at the same time, you got blessed with it.
Yeah. And I always say one of the best things is I don't have to apologize for my ministry anymore. Well, yeah, that's what they're doing, but that's not what I'm doing, was what I used to say. You know,
Right.
You're supporting me, not them.
Right, yeah.
But it was hard to make that separation.
I can only imagine, and I imagine also that I wonder is your ministry now that you have, are you localized? Do you go globally? Do you cover most of the region in the States?
Our direct outreach, obviously we live in Fort Worth, so our direct outreach is here in the Metroplex. But my ministry in the churches is everywhere. I mean, I will literally go coast to coast from one week to the next. I'll be in Florida one Sunday, and the next Sunday I'll be in Northern California or Washington State.
Mm-hmm.
And then the following Sunday I'll be in Pennsylvania. You know, so I mean, I'm just coming and going where the doors are open to us, and we're seeing a lot of interest in the churches for the ministry that we have.
Well, I can honestly say, especially for some of my family member, when we hear your name pop up that you're coming to our church, we get very excited because we get to learn a lot.
Yeah, that's good.
You do such a great job at educating the whole congregation about the Jewish life, and I appreciate that because, you know, it does open up a lot of eyes to a lot of people that they don't truly see your side of everything.
Right.
You know, here at our Baptist church, you know, everything is our mission statement. We learn about the Jews, and coming from a Jew, you get to explain more in depth, and especially through your mission on what you're wanting us to learn more about. And that's awesome.
And that's our mission statement is twofold. One is our direct outreach into the Jewish community. But then equal to that is our inreach into the churches to do what you just said, because you just can't imagine how many churches have no clue that Jewish community is part of their responsibility where the gospel is concerned.
Right.
And the last church I pastored was in Chicago. 15 minutes from my church was a Jewish community, 250,000 strong. And that church was 100 years old when I got there.
Oh, wow.
And they never made one effort to get into that community with the gospel.
Wow.
In 100 years. And so, and that becomes so typical.
Mm-hmm.
We had somebody here in the Metroplex, large church, and it's near where the synagogues are on Hewlin. And when my wife called them about me coming to the possibility of bringing our ministry and preaching there, and he said, you know, we want to be good neighbors, and we're right here by these two big synagogues, and we just don't want to offend them by having your husband. Where's your understanding of the scriptures to make that kind of a statement?
Mm-hmm.
And really, what kind of a friend are you that you know what the end for them is going to be, but you'd rather pal around with them now?
Right, the intensity of it.
So that's part of what we do, is kind of wake people up to the need of taking the gospel to Jewish people, and then through the types of messages that I preach, educate them on how to do that.
And it helps a lot because, you know, it's always the saying of the person looking outside in.
Yeah.
And it really wakes them up a lot more when they get to actually be in instead of outside viewing it.
Yeah.
I got a question, actually. Here's one of the questions that are from our children ministry is, can you explain the different kind of Jewish denominations? Yeah. And is there a specific one that you follow?
Well, the last part I could take first, and that's that I really don't follow Judaism anymore because I follow Messiah. And um, all
Meaning
the,
you follow true scripture.
yeah. Um, I mean, because I take both testaments.
Mm-hmm.
Where before I only took the Hebrew scriptures. Now we're adding in, we also now accept the New Testament. Where in Judaism, you don't accept the New Testament at all. So there are Jewish believers that feel the necessity to continue or to keep the law of Moses. They're called Torah observant. They know nothing about being Torah observant. Torah being the law of Moses. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and it's all comprised in there. And they just feel like they have to do that. But I just believe that it would be wrong. Paul says, I think to almost every church that he wrote to,
Yes.
if it be of the law, then it's no longer of faith or of grace, and if it be of the law, it makes the grace of Christ of none effect.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to, as a believer now, to accept what Jesus as Messiah has done for me, and to put myself back under the law of Moses, is to say Jesus is not sufficient.
Right.
That I have to have my fingerprints on this.
Correct.
And so it just diminishes Jesus in that. But some people just feel like they have to have that to make them feel special. And they they just do that. But so I don't follow Judaism as such. I can't stop being Jewish because that's what I am, who I am. But so I call myself a Jewish believer. But as far as the denominations, I already said that I come from an Orthodox family.
We've heard the Orthodox one.
And the rabbis, long line of rabbis, and they're Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox or Hasidic. So you've got basically 4 denominations of observant Jews. You have the Orthodox, and the Orthodox believe every bit of the law of Moses. There's 613 commandments, not 10. 613.
Wow.
I mean, think about the 10. You're probably doing a pretty good job of keeping all 10.
Yeah.
So where's the risk? Where's the problem?
603.
You got 603 more,
right?
You know, that I'm sure you haven't even heard of.
That's correct.
But and then you have about 1,000 that the rabbis have added that bear just as much weight, because they're there to basically help you and protect you from violating what God actually declared.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like building a hedge around it. So anyway, the Orthodox believe you have to keep every bit of the law of Moses, and you can't omit any of it. On the other extreme, you have the Reform. The Reform say, we believe the law is important. But we believe that we should weigh it according to our cultural norm.
Mm-hmm.
The Orthodox live within walking distance of their synagogue because they won't drive their car on the Sabbath. Because the law of Moses forbids us from kindling a fire on the Sabbath.
Right.
So you can't cook on the Sabbath.
Okay.
My mom had to have all of her meals prepared by sundown on Friday for the next 24 hours.
Were they? I know this is a silly question. Were they all cold meals?
She could put a can of Sterno under them, but if that thing went out, it just went out. You couldn't relight it.
Oh wow, interesting.
We didn't watch television, flip a light switch, drive the car, because of the requirements. So, pardon me. They say the Orthodox live within walking distance of their synagogue because they won't drive on the Sabbath. And they'll say, I live 20 miles from my synagogue. If I don't drive, I can't get there. So it's all right for me to drive on the Sabbath. But in the process of doing this, they did away with too much of the law. And so then you have the conservative that come and they bridge the gap between the two, And they say, yes, we believe the law is vital. Yes, we believe we should wait according to our cultural norm. They went too far, got rid of too much.
Mm.
So they come along and take the middle ground.
Right.
Then you have branching off of the Orthodox, the ultra-Orthodox, or the Hasidim. And there's several different sects. I have to SECT this day and age.
Yeah.
You have to make sure
clarify this.
people are hearing what you're saying.
Especially online.
Because the least woke people on the planet are the ultra-Orthodox Jewish people. So anyway, they take the Orthodox and the adherence to the law to a whole nother level. But there are several different sects, and they are following the teachings of a specific rabbi that started that sect, and they're very militant in their observance of his teachings.
Right.
Now, this usually goes back to the 1800s, or even earlier, and then they're following that rabbi's teachings, and they don't intersect, they don't mix, because even they'll tell you that they would never, like, if this fellow is Lubavitch, he would never marry a woman that was Satmar, because he'll tell you, I don't respect her rabbi, but her parents do. So by marrying her, I bring this trouble into my home. So I only marry within my sect.
Interesting.
And so they just are so given over and devoted to their life living the law of Moses and studying Talmud, which is a commentary of the rabbis on the law of Moses, on the Torah, and they just take it to a whole nother level.
Oh wow, that's very interesting. So let me ask a little sub question to all that. In Israel standing right now with the four different denominations, which one is the more, I guess you would say, popular?
Oh, well, just like in America, the largest population of Jewish people right now in this country and forever has been New York City. 3 million Jewish people in that one city. But in Brooklyn, there are 750,000 Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox.
Wow.
That's more than in Jerusalem
Wow.
and Tel Aviv combined. So, and that's just one borough.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where the lion's share focuses on the Orthodox and the ultra-Orthodox. That doesn't mean that there aren't any in Manhattan and the other boroughs, but this is where the largest.
Right, the congested area.
Yeah, and so then the further you get from New York City, the less of that you have. Like here in Fort Worth,
Mm-hmm.
we don't have an Orthodox synagogue. We have Reform and we have Conservative, and they're kind of one in front of the other. They're over by the library on Hewlin, north of I-20.
Okay, yeah, I know where that's at.
Okay, one of them is right on Hewlin. Then you have the library, and then catty corner behind this one is, and behind the library is the Reform.
Okay.
And they can be that way because they're not competing for members. Because if you're Reform, you're not going to the Conservative. If you're Conservative, you're not going. I used to go to the Conservative synagogue for the Torah study. It'd be Tuesday nights. Whenever I was in town at home, then I would go, and I made friends with the rabbi. But remember, I'm from the Orthodox tradition, and the Reform is so far out in left field that the Orthodox never even considered them Jews.
Right.
So I've never been in that synagogue. I struggled a little bit with the idea of going to the Conservative. And then I found that rabbi leans Orthodox.
Uh-huh.
So I felt a little more at home with him, but I couldn't go to the reform. I just couldn't do it. And I've been saved 54 years. I still can't go in there. So old rivers, still waters do run deep, right?
That's good. We got to talk about it here earlier just a little bit. It kind of, I never heard it in this wording, but then you explained what it actually meant, and then I understood. But for the viewers, will you explain more about Yom Kippur?
Yeah, Yom Kippur. It is. There are 3 of the fall feasts. There are 7 annual feasts. 3 of them come in the fall, and they just lump them together. They're the high holy days. You have Rosh Hashanah, which is really the Feast of Trumpets, but it's considered the Jewish New Year. That feast is marking, in Judaism, they consider this to be when God completed creation. So that's when time starts to mark. So that's why it's called the Jewish New Year.
Okay.
Then 10 days later, you have Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. And that becomes the highest, most holiest
day. I've heard is the Day of Atonement.
Yeah, that would be. I oftentimes rattle off some that I'm so painfully familiar with, and if somebody doesn't say, what did you say?
Which I imagine you probably had several and everything, but when I heard that for the first time, I was like, that's interesting. Then when we got to discuss and you said it, I'm like, oh, well, I understand what that is.
And so this is the one day a year that you are coming to deal with your sins, the sins you've actually committed over the last 12 months. Has no view toward eternity. It's just allowing you to continue over the next 12 months to have an ongoing relationship with this God. And then 12 months later, you'll come again at Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and deal with your sin that you've committed between now and that day. So that becomes a very important day because you have to cover that base.
Right.
You know. Today it's done through prayer and liturgy and good works. But they want to get the temple rebuilt so that they can again do the sacrifice that's required.
Right. And I got in hearing about the temple a lot. That was actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff.
It's very exciting stuff. And I like how it kind of segues to this next part of this question, because when you were discussing it, and I laughed when you were talking about on Genesis chapter 15, how you have that page completely worn out, how much you've brought it up. But in Genesis chapter 15 and Joshua 1:4, you're talking about the land promised to Israel. And I'm hoping so I can show the viewers that map that you had and how the actual layout of the size of Israel was supposed to be and what Israel is today.
They left it. It's on that hard drive, the church's hard drive.
Definitely be taking that if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So that way y'all can see it. It's very. If I have it, it's right here. But otherwise, can you go a little bit, just kind of like a synopsis for the viewers, talking about that promise of the land and why?
Well, God made a covenant with Abraham. Well, Abram, as his name was in that day, and it had nothing to do with Abram. I love later in Scripture where God's chiding Israel and say, I didn't choose you because you were the biggest, the brightest, the most attractive. I chose you because you were nothing. I always say, out of the barren womb of a 90-year-old woman, God brought all of this. Think about it. So the covenant, and it's important to understand that covenant, because today you have people that believe what's called replacement theology and believe that the Jewish people, that Israel has violated this covenant, and therefore God's taken the promises from them and given them to the church. And now the church replaces Israel. And that is biblically so untenable, because this was not an agreement that God had Abraham enter into. Abraham was sound asleep. Genesis 15. God instructed him to make the sacrifice. And then it says that when it was dark, that a deep sleep fell upon Abram. And then I think it's verse 17 that God alone, it says, it uses some figurative language for him, but you see God alone walking amidst the pieces of the sacrifice.
Yes.
Abram didn't.
Yeah,
he was sound asleep. Yeah. So only God did. So this was not a bilateral agreement.
Mm-hmm.
This was God in his sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
And I always have to say, I said it tonight in church. We as Baptists don't like that word, but our God is sovereign. He will do as he chooses to do. And he chose to bestow this upon Abram, and it had nothing to do with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gave them the land grant, he said, for his seed. And that's another important little part, because I heard somebody recently trying to say, well, God may have made a promise to Abraham, but that didn't include his descendants. It's Genesis 15 very clearly, and to thy seed I will give.
Hence why that page is so worn out.
Yeah, exactly. And so it says, and it gives the borders of the land.
Mm-hmm.
It cleans up easier to see and understand in Joshua 1 and verse 4. Because you do a little more research with Genesis 15 and those closing verses where he lays out. But in Joshua 1 and verse 4, it's very easy. From the wilderness, which is Saudi Arabia, to Lebanon, from the great river, which is the Nile, to the Euphrates, to the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your coast. It's this much land, not this much land.
Right, the strip that they're in now.
Yeah, and then again, like I said, if you ever can look at the Palestinian Manifesto, what the Palestinians want is not just this, this cry, free Palestine from the river to the sea. That's not what the PLO wants. That's not what the Palestinian organization wants. They want everything God gave to Abram, because they believe they're Abram's seed. In a way they are, because of Ishmael. But God tells Abraham, when Isaac was like 33 years old, that means Abram was 133. He said, take thy son, thine only son. Ishmael was alive. Ishmael was like 9 or 10 years older than Isaac. God didn't acknowledge him. He was not the son of the promise. And it's through Ishmael that the Arab nations come.
Right.
So he said, take thy son, thine only son, sacrifice him to me. Isaac. Yeah. So, anyhow, all of this, the promises come down through Isaac. And then you have, Isaac has 2 sons, Esau and Jacob. And Jacob's name was changed to Israel, he who wrestles with God. And then he had 12 sons. Those 12 sons are the 12 tribes.
Yep.
You take Joseph out, but his 2 sons replace him and Levi. Levi is pulled out. The reason Levi is pulled out is Levi is a priestly tribe given to all of the tribes to take care of.
Right.
So they don't have a specific inheritance of land, but Joseph's 2 sons fill these 2 voids.
Thank you for going more in depth about that. Yeah. And then we got 2 more questions left. So before I ask the second one about from the kids, I actually want to bring up that you talk about that you do yearly trips. I don't know right about now though, but to Israel.
Yeah.
You do like a guided trip, correct?
We do tours, yeah.
You do the tours. And what I was more curious is, with these tours and everything, what is your mission statement for? What is the goals that you try to achieve when I
take people to Israel? It's all part of transferring my burden to their hearts. And when we take you to Israel and give you the Jewishness and anybody can take you to Israel, but only a Jewish believer can give you the Jewishness of it. And when you go in this way, and I can take you to these places and you can see it, and I try to give it to you from that perspective, it opens up your heart. Your Bible will never read the same. It's like reading it in color when you get back. But most people, when they go to Israel on these tours, think that they have a heart for Israel.
Right.
But once they've gone on this tour, it's life-changing. And that's their testimony, not what I assess it to be.
Right.
Because every year the people say this was life-changing because now they have a burden for Israel and the Jewish people like never before. So,
which I love the way that you explain it, from reading it and turning it into color. There was a novel that I remember reading back in, I think it was high school. I don't know if you've heard of it. It was called The Giver. And in this novel, it was this, not really a utopia, but it was a city that these people lived in, and everything was black and white. But you had one person who had an ability, which was the giver, that saw things in color. And this other person he stumbled across was questioning, why is this land black and white? Why is it, no rights, wrongs, and stuff like that? And he presented him a new view of that area. And he started seeing things in color and a different perception. So I love how you bring that up, because that is true. What you're saying is that, bringing those people and getting them the views from you, you're giving them a new perception, a new feeling towards everything.
Yeah.
And that's deep. So, do you have a web page or anything that we can link on the bio for them to check it out?
Yeah. ahavatmessiah.com.
All right. Be on the lookout. Probably post that on the link below. That way you can take a look at it. I'm sure you probably have like tour pictures and stuff like that on there.
I think we do.
So that way they can take a look at it.
We have a tour page.
Yeah. That's
so
perfect.
I'm sure there's got to be some pictures.
But here's the last question I have for you, and give granted, this is actually coming from the kids. My daughter's in that class, so you're seeing that age range from 5 years old to 9 years old.
Oh, okay.
So trying to explain it towards there.
So we're talking about kids, not teens.
These are kids, and the depth of this question is pretty deep, and they want to understand why Israel is at war.
Yeah. And not just this particular time, but in general.
In general.
To understand, because there's, generously speaking, there may be 20 million Jewish people worldwide. Among 8 billion people on the planet, there's maybe 20 million that are Jewish. Around 7 million, 6.7 or 8 million or so here, about 7 million, 7.2 million in Israel, and the rest of them in small pockets around the world. You wouldn't even know these people existed. So why do they generate all this hatred and attention? So to understand this, you've got to go back to, it's Revelation 12, and you've got 3 players. You've got a radiant woman with a crown of 12 stars on her head, about to give birth to a man-child. And then you've got the dragon ready to pounce on the man-child as soon as he's born and destroy him. A few verses down, around verses 4 or 5, it identifies the man-child as Messiah and the dragon as the devil. A lot of question about who the woman could be. Some had said, well, the woman's a church. Well, the church didn't give birth to Messiah. Messiah gave birth to the church. So it's Israel. A crown of 12 stars on her head. Some said it's Mary. Well, physically, Mary gave birth to Messiah, but Mary is never spoken of in such glamorous terms. Mary was under a death sentence. She was betrothed to Joseph, and before they got married, she's pregnant, and it's not Joseph's. That's a death sentence. That's why Joseph thought to get rid of her, put her away privately, get her out of Dodge before they could kill her. So it has to be Israel. Israel gave birth to the church. Then, and gave birth to Messiah, so to speak. So then it goes down and it gives you an instant replay of the war in heaven where Lucifer, who is full of himself, Isaiah, he has eye trouble. I am will be seated upon the throne. I will usurp the throne of God. I will be his God himself. And God says, not my lifetime.
Yeah.
Tosses him out of heaven.
See ya.
So he's tried a frontal attack and failed. Now he tries another frontal attack and tries to destroy Messiah as soon as he's born. And God has Joseph and Mary take him to Egypt and escape. So he does. So then that failed. So then down around verse 13, 17, and that it speaks of, because of these two failures, the dragon now turns his vengeance upon the woman that dared to bring forth the man-child that sealed his fate. When Messiah went to the cross, see, the devil doesn't have full foreknowledge, or he never would have let that happen.
Right.
When Messiah went to the cross, that sealed the devil's fate. So now all he can do is try to impose as much pain on God as he can. And I always say, when I was pastoring, people were frustrated with me or upset with me, and they would attack me personally. I just blow that off. If they couldn't get to me, they'd go try to get to me through my wife and attack her, and that aggravated me. But then when that didn't work, they'd go after my daughter, and then that just infuriates you. That's what the devil's been doing. He's been going after the apple of God's eye, trying to inflict as much pain on God as he can, because he can't beat him with a frontal attack. So this is what his plan is.
Right.
He'll go after the apple of his eye. And that's what he's been doing in every generation since.
Wow. That's deep. Well, I really do appreciate your time here. Thank you so much for being a part of Godcast and joining my channel Reborn, by the way. But all to you viewers out there, thank you so much for tuning in and watching it. Please make sure you hit that subscribe button. Please make sure you follow my Facebook, my Instagram on RebornTCG23. Check out the future merch that we have ready to go. And like always, I'll see y'all next time. Thank you. Have a nice one.